Of middays in the Element Wealth Studios, Dave Hughes here, and joining us now in the big chair there, the executive director for the Center for Violence Protection, Sandy Middleton, joins us. How are you, Sandy? Good to talk to you again.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me. I'm enjoying the big chair.
Yeah, it's comfortable, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice.
I mean, you got 17 screens in front of you, but you get to ignore them, so it's okay.
That's right.
It's no big deal. October is a big month for a subject that you, I think, very rightly care quite a bit about, and so do I, and that's everything from domestic violence, but more importantly, all the way up to human trafficking, which is still a problem in Mississippi, isn't it?
Yes, exactly, on both topics.
I've asked you this before. I'm going to ask you again in the desperate hope that we have some kind of answer now. What can we do to stop this?
Well, we always say we'd like to work ourselves out of a job, but I don't see that happening anytime in the near future. So this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we do spend a lot of time just talking about providing victims with services and making sure that our courts are taking this issue seriously. We had the domestic violence homicide just 2 days ago in the metro area, and he had been an offender before. And so, without getting into the details of the case, we see this happen with these domestic violence homicides, and it's just such a tragedy when women are killed in their own homes by, a man who supposedly loves them, and it's heartbreaking, and it's impactful to the immediate family and the community and everybody involved. So we're just working real hard to implement some things to help the victim and again to encourage our courts to use some new tools to recognize these high risk offenders.
Well, and this speaks, we've been talking about this kind of thing for the whole show just about, but back in the first hour, Natchez Mayor Dan Gibson was talking about how many violent crimes are caused by repeat offenders who kind of build up to it. And we kind of see something very similar in domestic violence. The first time there's domestic violence, they're not trying to kill them.
Right. We know that domestic violence usually escalates without some kind of appropriate intervention. But what we typically see in our justice courts and our municipal courtrooms is, we'll see an offender walk out of the courtroom 2 and 3 and 4 times before, they receive any kind of punishment for what they've done. And so when you embrace the fact that domestic violence is about power and control, every time they get by with it, then they become more powerful. And so it really, you've heard the old saying, we're creating a monster, and that's what we're doing by not holding this offender accountable initially for what he's done, or she. I mean, offenders can also be women. So it's important to do that, and we're working real hard to implement this lethality assessment protocol, which it empowers law enforcement when they come to a domestic violence incident. That I have it here with me. There are 11 questions that an officer can ask the victim in this particular situation, and if the victim screens in, then, there are some other things that we can do to make sure that she and many times her children are safe. So, and it's like, has he ever used a weapon against you or threatened you with a weapon? Has he threatened to kill you or your children? Do you think he might try to kill you? So there's just a litany of questions, and this is a nationally accepted instrument that's being used. And so it helps law enforcement and the court system identify the most likely offenders that will be lethal. And so, like I said, it's a wonderful tool, and we're working real hard in the metro area to help along.
The one thing, and it's almost impossible to solve as a problem, but the one thing is, and if you know any law enforcement and talk to them, know them really well and get them talking about without getting specific details on specific cases, scared victims lie.
Yes.
when police get there. Oh, no. It's almost a cliche at this point, no, I fell down or I ran into the door. And no, he punched you in the face. Yeah. Is what happened. She hit you with a frying pan. We know what happened. We just have to have you to admit it. And I think some of that ties back to what you were just talking about, because in a very real way, I think a lot of times victims have the fear that if they say something, if they tell the truth about what has been happening to them in their daily life, well, the person that's been doing it to them gets arrested, and 2 days later they're back out on the street and headed back to the house.
That's right, and they're not going to be happy.
Yeah, and then it's definitely going to be a worse situation for them. So they, in self-preservation, say, well, no, it's fine. It'll be okay, when it's not, and it won't be.
Right.
Until it's almost too late. So it does come back to the court system in a lot of ways, because it's become well known that, you get arrested, you're going to be right back out.
Yeah, and I think what we did several years ago is, we made it to where law enforcement could press the charges against a domestic violence offender. Now, there are certain things that they need in order to be able to do that, but we've really had a pushback in our court systems that, they won't proceed with the case without the victim. And it's like, well, what do you do in a murder case? I mean, you don't have a victim, and also if the law enforcement officer pressed the charges, that means that they saw enough to be the witness in the case. So that a lot of times part of what we do at the center is we provide pictures. I mean, we'll take pictures of bruising, and we even have a nurse practitioner that can document injuries and everything for court. So there's a lot of different ways that that the courts can see and know that it was a domestic violence incident without having to force the victim to, to testify, knowing that the worst thing that's going to happen is they may get 6 months in jail. So, it's very difficult for victims of domestic violence, because many times they're the breadwinner, they're the father of the children. And, again, in chancery court, when they go for a divorce, they're going to see a judge, and the judge is going to say, well, the daddy has the right to see the kids. And then that's not ever amicable, because many times the offender uses the kids to continue to, to manipulate and demonstrate power and control. And so it's really, really a difficult issue, and we really appreciate everything we see law enforcement doing to come alongside these victims. And so, at this point, we just really kind of need the courts to catch up.
Well, exactly. And it goes back to the theme today, which is misdirected compassion. The compassion for the person that is beating up their spouse or their life partner or co-parent or whatever the situation is. The compassion for them should not outweigh the compassion for the victim. And we've kind of reached that point in a lot of areas of life, and we need to do away with that. We need to get a little tougher again, because we are putting soft, caring feelings in the wrong direction sometimes.
You certainly get an amen from the world of advocates on that. And they really... It's because it is such a difficult situation. It does deserve a lot of attention. And in our last legislative session, they decided to decrease some of the fines and fees that were being assigned to domestic violence offenders. And you're like, why? I mean, why do we spend so much time thinking about the offender and what works for the offender? I mean, 9 times out of 10. When there is a domestic violence incident, the victim has to leave the home, usually take the children, find a place to live. Many times they don't have transportation. So the victim has all these issues to work with, and yet we go to court and, the mentality is, well, he just messed up, or that's just their business, or, and so it's really difficult.
If the judicial opinion is we can't trust anybody, we can't trust the victim when they say what was done, we can't trust the advocates who have these pictures of the damage done by this violence, we can't trust the police officer when they file these charges for them without the victim coming forward. If we can't trust anyone, my question to those judges would be, why should we trust you?
Oh, that's powerful right there. I like that.
I woke up in a mood again this morning, Sandy. I'm sorry you're stuck with it. Can you hang around through the break?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. We'll continue discussing this with Sandy Middleton when we come back here on Middays in the Element Wealth Studios. Keep it here. Absolutely perfect. Welcome back. Middays in the Element Wealth Studios. Dave Hughes, Sandy Middleton with us in the studio. And I'm going to blindside you with a question you may not have the answer to in front of you, and that's fine. I'm prefacing it this way to get you off the hook if you don't. Do we have any idea about the numbers when it comes to domestic violence in the state of Mississippi?
You know, you're asking me as I've got my annual report right here in front of me, so I was ready for you today.
Now, I love it.
Yeah, there as far as we generally compile the court cases from across the state, and it varies between 5,000 and 6,000 misdemeanor domestic violence cases that are seen in court. So that comes directly from the courts.
So 5,000 to 6,000.
Yes.
That's over a year.
Yes.
And that's about 5,000 or 6,000 too many, if you ask me. But I don't think we'll ever completely eradicate this. It goes back to what you said at the beginning. You'd love to get yourself out of a job. I'm not sure you're ever going to be able to do that because human beings, some of them, they stink.
Well, and of course, you know, what we also know about domestic violence victims, and it goes along with what you're talking about, is the majority of them don't report ever. And many report one time, and then, you know, when things go just like you described in the previous segment, they're never going to report again. And you know, so that number is certainly not representative of the victims across the state.
Now, of course, part of the problem is sentencing guidelines, because those are handed down by the Supreme Court and other people, and they tell the local judges, well, you can do between this and this for a penalty. I just feel like we are trying to standardize something that's an individual situation, case by case, and I don't think from the results that it seems to be working, Sandy.
Well, I would tend to agree with you, but our frustration is that we have a hard time getting to the sentencing phase. I mean, generally, you know, what you're talking about, it takes place on your felony cases and, you know, in the big courts. And, you know, the majority of domestic violence cases are seen as misdemeanors in either municipal or justice courts. And, you know, everybody needs to go sit in on their local municipal or justice court session because it's an amazing thing to watch. I mean, you've literally got sometimes, you know, 50, 60, 70, 100 people standing around with traffic tickets to domestic violence to theft, and you know, your prosecutor generally comes in, and generally the prosecutor has his or her own law practice, but they come into court and there's a stack of files, you know, and they start to kind of work through them, and you know, it's just a real sloppy way to pass out justice, you know, because I mean, literally, if there are, let's say, 15 domestic violence cases on the docket, literally some of them will just get tossed aside and remanded, and you know, and that seems really simple in the moment for the court, but when you have a victim who is displaced and who is in danger, and the court case, the court puts it off or resets it for, and usually it's not the next month. Usually it's, you know, 60 days or 90 days. So they kick the can down the road. They reset the case. And then in reality what happens is you may have a victim that takes off from work or gets a babysitter or both and comes and sits in court for hours waiting on their case to be called. And this happens to them 4 and 5 times, and it continues to get, you know, pushed back. And finally, they just quit coming. And so then that time that they don't come, the prosecutor says, well, the victim's not here. Remand it to the file. And that's how it goes.
in between those 2, 3, 4 times, it gets a little worse for them in their day-to-day life every time. So all of the evidence, all of the results from trying to get some help with their situation teach them, well, this isn't the way to get any help because I'm getting no help. It's just making things worse. So they stop.
Exactly.
That's the unintended second order effect of just remanding cases or putting them to the side or letting them out with no bond and saying, well, now don't do it again. That's not what you do to be effective in this kind of situation.
No, and we have a domestic abuse intervention program that's based on the Duluth model. It's an evidence-based model where it's a behavioral modification program, and offenders are paid. They're required to pay for their attendance at the program, and that pays our facilitators and our security. And they can come for 6 months and attend these classes and hopefully learn to stop being an offender. But what happens even with that is if a judge, a prosecutor recommends this and a judge says, okay, you've been charged with misdemeanor or simple domestic violence, and we're going to remand your sentence until you complete the batter's intervention program. And if the way it's supposed to work, if there's a guilty plea and then they go through the class, if they complete the class and everything goes well, then at the end of that, they're able to remand it and it just stays in the file, so to speak. But a lot of times what happens is judges will just say, well, you go to that program, but there's no teeth in it to where, if the offender just doesn't want to come or, refuses to, is there half the time and doesn't finish the class, a lot of times the judge will just say, well, let's give him another chance. And you're like, well, you just gave him a chance and he showed you what he thought about the option that you gave him, but he didn't come. So, there's just a lot of problems that we need to get our hands around.
Well, we need to look at this from the perspective of drug courts because those have been very successful.
That's right.
But it's exactly what you're talking about. You're in trouble. You're going to jail. But if you do this and finish it, we'll ease up on you. If you don't, well, this is what you're getting, and that's it. It has to be an either or. It can't be maybe. Drug court doesn't work that way. I don't think this should work that way either.
No, agreed. And again, just to repeat what you've been talking about, you've been on your soapbox about this morning, and it's all about accountability. When we raise our children, the military, in so many aspects of our lives. Like I'd like to get back to my office in about 5 minutes, but I bet if I go 105. I'm not going to go far around the interstate before I find some accountability. And so, it's very frustrating that, it just seems like the justice process, it doesn't even out for victims, and it's just not right, as you said.
Well, and it's a problem that has to be dealt with because I'm sorry, with all of the hue and cry over taking care of people and making sure that everyone's needs are met, well, how about the need to not have you and your kids beaten up on a daily basis because somebody else had a SAD that day? That's the reality for thousands of people in the state of Mississippi every day. All things being equal, that one's not. It's, to me, a higher order problem than some of the other ones that we seem to want to focus on, but we have a tendency to want to deal with the easy problems to get an easy win and move forward instead of dealing with the things that actually have an impact on people's lives. And yes, I am on one today.
I'm glad you are. I'm loving it.
Just very rightly pointed out. I'm on one full gallop today. Is there anything anyone can do to help this process along and help make this better?
Well, I've been meeting with some legislators recently and just trying to remind them that the people of Mississippi care about justice. We care about justice. We want to see people who are offenders get some punishment. And I just think that, like you said earlier, we get tangled up in stuff that is really irrelevant to the average citizen. and we don't think about protecting people and keeping people safe. And, that's without even going into the trauma and the issues that it causes our children when they're in domestic violence homes. I mean, they have PTSD. They grow up and many times, have a lot of psychological problems. And, so it's not only impactful for the victim, it's impactful for the children, and also not to mention our police officers. It's the most dangerous call that they go to.
And it's their least favorite. Ask any of them. They will be glad to tell you that. Sandy Middleton, I'm very proud we have verified that you will not drive faster than 104
I promise.
going back to the office.
I promise.
Because 105 is a problem. 104, yeah, it'll be okay.
That's right. I'll get by with that.
Yeah, it's no problem at all. Sandy, always enjoyed talking to you. Keep up the good work and keep us up to date on this problem. Hopefully we can get you in here one day and we can discuss how much the numbers have dropped and things have improved. That's the goal.
I like it. Thank you, Dave.
We continue on this Wednesday morning on Middays in the Element Wealth Studios right after this.